Have you ever been part of a project where the deadline felt, I don't know, more like a hopeful guess than a hard fact? Yeah, we've all been there. If you're tired of project plans that just seem to crumble on contact with reality, you know the pain of estimating work in hours. Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a much better way that Agile teams use to get out of that mess.
So let's start with the big one, the question that keeps so many project managers up at night. Why is this so hard? Why are we so bad at guessing how long things will take? I mean, we plan everything down to the hour, and yet, projects still wind up late. The thing is, it's usually not about how hard the team is working. It's about the tool we're using to measure the work in the first place.
And here's the problem in a nutshell. You ask two different developers to estimate the exact same task. The senior dev, who's seen this all before, says, "Oh, that's easy, 8 hours." The junior dev looks at it and says, "Whoa, I'm going to need at least 16 hours for that." Now, who's right? Well, they both are. Their experience is different, which means your idea of an hour is not the same as my idea of an hour. And that makes time a really shaky, unstable way to plan for an entire team.
Okay, so how do we fix this whole mess? Here's the plan for our journey today. First, we'll look at the estimation trap. Then we'll get into what story points actually are. After that, we'll explore the real magic behind them, something called relative sizing. We'll see how teams do this together. And finally, we'll talk about the payoff in the real world.
All right, first up, the estimation trap. Let's really dig into why our go-to method, just counting up the hours, is so often where things start to go wrong, especially when we're doing complex, creative work.
You know, when we say a task will take 16 hours, it just sounds so definite, so precise. But really, it's an illusion. That number completely ignores all the messy, real-world stuff, the unexpected problems, the hidden complexity, the risks you don't even know about yet. It's like trying to build a house on a foundation made of sand.
So, if hours are the problem, what's the answer? Let's introduce a totally different way to measure our work. Let's talk about story points.
Okay, so what is a story point? It's an abstract number, and the most important word here is relative. It's all about comparison. A 2-point story is simply about twice as much effort as a 1-point story. An 8-point story is way bigger than a 3. The numbers themselves don't mean anything outside of that context. We're not asking how long will it take anymore. We're asking how big is it? And crucially, this separates the size of the work from how fast any single person can do it.
And this is so important. A single story point number actually wraps up 3 different things. First, there's just the sheer volume of work, the amount of stuff to do. But it also includes the complexity. Is this straightforward or a brain twister? And finally, it accounts for risk and uncertainty. Are we depending on another team? Are we using a technology we've never touched before? All of that gets baked into this one number, giving us a much richer picture of the real effort.
Now, I know this might feel a bit weird and abstract. You might be thinking, wait, how does being less specific actually make us more accurate? It's a fantastic question, and the answer is all about how our brains are naturally wired to think about size and effort. This quote from Mike Cohn, one of the pioneers in the Agile world, just nails it. We humans are fantastic at comparing things. You can instantly feel the difference between a 1 kilo weight and a 2 kilo weight. But trying to tell the difference between 20 and 21 kilos? That's way harder, even though it's the same 1 kilo difference. The same exact principle applies to estimating work. And this is precisely why so many teams use the Fibonacci sequence for their story points. See how the gaps between the numbers get bigger and bigger? That's on purpose. It reflects reality. It stops us from wasting time arguing if a big task is a 20 or a 21. Instead, we have to make a real choice. Is it an 8 or is it a much bigger 13? It forces us to admit that our estimates get fuzzier as the work gets larger.
This graph here perfectly shows the law of diminishing returns when it comes to estimation. You see, you can spend just a little bit of effort and get like 80% of the accuracy you need. But trying to get that last 20% to be perfect takes a huge amount of time for almost no extra benefit. Story points are all about keeping the team on that steep, efficient part of the curve, getting estimates that are good enough to plan with and getting them fast.
Now, a story point estimate isn't something that a manager just assigns. Oh no. It's a consensus that the entire team builds together. And that shared understanding is usually created through a really cool, simple process called planning poker.
So here's how it works. The team talks through a task. Then everyone secretly chooses a card from their deck with a story point number on it. On the count of 3, everybody shows their card at the same time. If the numbers are all over the place, the people who voted highest and lowest explain why. I think it's an 8 because of this. and I think it's a 3 because of that. Then you talk about it and vote again, repeating until you all agree on a number.
And that simple act of everyone revealing their cards at the same time, it's pure genius. It's designed to defeat a really powerful mental trap called anchoring. You know how it is, if the most senior person in the room says, "I think this is a 3, suddenly it's almost impossible for anyone else to imagine it as an 8 or a 13. That first number anchors everyone's thinking. Planning poker completely gets rid of that problem.
This is also why the entire team has to be in the room. It's not just for developers. The person writing the code sees the technical complexity. The tester sees all the weird edge cases that need to be checked. The designer sees the user experience hurdles. When you bring all those different viewpoints together, you uncover things that any one person would have missed. It builds a deep, shared understanding, creates collective ownership, and frankly produces a way more accurate estimate.
And let's be super clear about this. The point of planning poker is not to just average the votes. Please don't do that. The real value, the magic, is in the conversation that happens when the votes are different. That discussion, where you uncover those different perspectives and learn from each other, that's 100 times more valuable than the final number you agree on.
Okay, so this whole process sounds interesting, but you're probably wondering, what's the actual payoff? Why should my team go through all this trouble? Let's talk about the very real, tangible benefits that you get from working this way.
So after a few cycles of work, or sprints, teams start to figure out their velocity. It's just the average number of story points they get done in a typical sprint. So if your team consistently knocks out about, say, 20 story points every 2 weeks, that's your velocity. And suddenly you have this incredibly powerful and reliable tool for forecasting. If you have a backlog of 100 points of work, you can say with real confidence, that's going to take us about 5 more sprints.
This really just sums up the whole shift in thinking. Trying to estimate in days or hours feels familiar, but it's slow, it's often contentious, and it gives you this false sense of precision. Story points, on the other hand, are abstract, sure, but the process is fast, it's collaborative, and it gives you stable estimates that aren't dependent on who's doing the work. You're moving from asking how long to asking how big.
So when you put it all together, you get some huge wins. Your planning meetings get faster and way more effective. Your estimates are more realistic because they account for complexity and risk. The entire team's focus shifts from just tracking hours to actually delivering value together. And because of velocity, you can finally give people predictable forecasts they can actually count on.
So we'll leave you with this to think about. Switching to story points isn't just about changing your unit of measurement. It's about changing the entire conversation your team has about work. It's a fundamental shift, a move away from a culture of just counting hours to a culture of delivering incredible value, together.